Hey friend, listen. I know the world is scary right now. Corruption, war, inflation, demographics, degeneracy, disease, unrest, hatred, and despair. We didn't come here to tell you how it is, but that it's going to get way better.
Got a good thing coming, and it's all I need. Everything I wanted, so wait and see.
Better by Bitcoin.
Always so good. Always so
Love
good.
it. All right, guys, welcome back to Better by Bitcoin. Today, we kind of wanted to talk about where we were just shooting around some ideas for a pod. And a lot of these ideas were like, I don't know if I want to do that or whatever, but there was kind of this underlying mechanism that we were kind of confronted with about these ideas, which was there's a differentiation between Bitcoin wisdom and wisdom in a Bitcoin world versus fiat wisdom and wisdom in a fiat world. So we kind of just wanted to explore that a little bit. And as we're doing research, it was like, wait a second, it just connects to everything. There's so many other like jumping off points. For me, one of the things that, well, before I get started, we also have JD and Corey on the pod. Welcome, guys. Also, yeah, here we are, episode 38. Congratulations, everybody. We did it. But yeah, let's jump right in. So one of the difficulties with the fiat world and the Bitcoin world is that there's very little overlap and nobody can really see it, especially in the fiat world. And so the first, like, we got together some quotes about this stuff. And the first quote that comes to mind for me is the famous David Foster Wallace quote from, I believe it was a graduation speech, maybe at like Reed or some college, but he starts off with this, story. There are these two fish, young fish, swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" And that was the start of his speech. But it goes on to say, there's something there, right? It goes on to say, the immediate point of the fish story is that the most obvious, ubiquitous, important realities are often the ones that are the hardest to see and talk about. For me, that is what it's like talking to anybody or interacting with anybody who's still stuck in a fiat mindset in a fiat world. They just can't see it. What the hell is water? Right? You talk about incentives of fiat and how it pollutes or changes or does something. And they're like, no, we've known about this for years. This is that really high level philosophical concept that Freud was talking about this. That's where it's from. It's from Freud. That's why everyone's like that, because nobody's reading Freud, but everyone's like that because of Freud. There's this disconnect. People just can't see past their little fiat world, if you will. So
I have a question about this, because I was having a conversation about this recently with a pastor friend. We were talking about the existential things we're facing at the moment, what he experiences leading a Presbyterian church, and we were talking about fiat and the Fed and inflation and the fact that more and more people are aware that inflation is really bad. And he doesn't study the economics side like I do. I really love that and read it. But he said, the Creature from Jekyll Island, I read in high school. I knew this was a problem 20 years ago. And it feels like people are just now starting to wake up to it. And the thing that I couldn't understand, I still don't totally understand, is as people wake up to this, why is there a big component of people defending the fiat world, thinking that the Fed really has our best interests at heart? It feels like all of that anti-establishment, anti-corporatism that's been so present for the past 20, 25 years, and even longer, that's just my experience with it. It feels like it's been such a common thing. We all love to hate Monsanto because they ruin our food. We all love to hate monopolies and monopolistic urges, and we love competition and the freedom of the working person to elevate their economic status. These are all pretty universal, like across bipartisan American values. And when it comes to this one, the fiat world, it feels like there's this crazy pushback from normal people, from common people. It doesn't feel like it's all top down. And I've been trying to figure out why that is. Why do people dig in their heels on printed money, controlled money, and the Fed?
I have a take on that actually. It is really hard for you to go against the only thing you've ever known. It's really difficult for you to look yourself in the mirror and affirm the fact that you've been living a lie. And I think that's the challenge with the fiat mentality is you were born into this, so it's as real as gravity. The fiat world, the fiat structure, the fiat culture is as real as gravity for normies. And the challenge is you have to psychologically and philosophically start to believe that gravity is wrong if you actually want to be able to understand Bitcoin. And I think that's the big challenge is we have this Keynesian gravity that is, you know, implanted and taught everywhere, and that's water. And so that's, I think, the challenge that we have is, you know, in order for you to truly break free of the matrix, as they say, you do have to be on the edges of those bell curves, because you either have to be completely incompetent, present, or really, 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 really smart to gain an understanding that they're trying to keep you in the middle. They're trying to keep you as a sheep. They're trying to keep you asleep so that way they can play their game and keep exploiting you. And so, yeah, I think the quote's great.
There's a really interesting dynamic there, though, too, because they're trying to keep, and it's like, are they trying? Like, do people like really actively believe that anyone's trying to get them to do anything? Like, no, we're like, everybody is constantly like, oh, they're going to job and working, like, there's no, oh, somebody's actually, you know, forcing me to do this. Somebody's forcing me to take fiat. And it's like, nobody believes that.
Yeah,
like,
I feel like when it was working really well, like it's so hard to have a conversation with my dad about this because he has decades of evidence of the bond market never going down. So a retirement portfolio for him was invest in as many equities as you can with an IRA or 401k. And then slowly, as you get closer to retirement, change your mix of that from stocks to bonds, and then you'll be fine. And I don't really blame him for having that opinion because he was right for decade after decade after decade. He was pretty much just right. And it worked out well enough for him that at this point in his life, it's probably going to work out for the rest of his life, at least, maybe stepwise, not as well as it would have 15 years ago. I think I have more trouble with the younger generation wanting the old system to work for them as well as it did for their parents. And I understand that instinct. It's safer. If you were the type of person that made a lot of quote unquote correct decisions, do well in school, go to a good college, try to get a job at a company, and that life isn't going to get you a home, isn't going to allow you to have as many kids as you wanted to have, some serious existential things. That's where I hope for people, especially of our generation, to say, I wish there was something better. And even if they're not ready to get all the way to Bitcoin, there's still gold just sitting there, right? Like gold is still a lot harder as a money than fiat is. And people are still extremely resistant to that. It's kind of like the boomer money, right? I just don't see a lot of warming up even to the idea that this is a huge problem. And because most of the solutions that I hear anecdotally when I have conversations with people who aren't Bitcoiners, most of the solutions I hear are, how can the government fix this by spending more? And that to me that's the water, right? It's to me, that's like the fish saying, I'm not in water. More water is what will help us, right?
So I think part of it is it's you, like JD, I think you said, you really have to confront the reality that if this is all just a fabrication, like the fiat is a fabrication, if it's all garbage BS, well, then what have I been working for the last 40 years or, shorter, longer, whatever? Why am I like, there's some real complications to that, right? Another famous quote, which is the, I'm going to butcher his name too, the Upton Sinclair quote, it is hard to get someone to believe something is true when their job depends on it not being true, right? Like if you work your entire life slaving away for money, that money can just be printed. I mean, this is a common refrain in the Bitcoin circles. Like, what have you done? You have literally wasted your entire life. That you accomplished nothing, right? Apart from the output of your work, you did all this stuff, and somebody else could just have pressed a button and given you the money. So, like, yeah, Corey, the framework of, oh, well, the government should fix this problem. It totally makes sense in a fiat world. It totally makes, like, that's how it all works because they have all the money. They have the money printer. Like, what we all agree to this social contract where they have the money printer, and so they should use it to fix all of our problems. But it doesn't work that way. Like, reality is that's disconnected from reality. So
yeah, I think I agree with you, and I think it helps me put some context in it. If you believe that value is time plus effort, right? With that kind of basic equation, value is created when you put time and effort into something, and the government or a small group of people can just create value out of nothing. And in order to do that, they have to steal the time and the effort of everyone else who's creating the actual value. That is evil, right? That's on the order of like a science fiction villain who, if I read it in a script, I'd say that's a little thin because it's too evil, right? And it's kind of, we talked about this a little bit on the pod last time, that the human brain likes to think in marginal changes. We don't like to think in order of magnitude changes. And it's just very, very hard to wrap our mind around on the order of someone telling you how many stars there are in the universe, right? It's just like a number that doesn't make any sense. Our brain can't comprehend it. And to me, that to understand how money printing is so evil and is so pervasive and touches everything is kind of like an order of magnitude shift in how corrupt you think our system is and how corrupt you think our world is. And I don't think people generally want to think that, right? Just at a base level.
Yeah, it's interesting, this notion, this idea of trading for something like X for Y, like value for value. Like the Bitcoin notion of value for value is actually challenging for a lot of normies and just kind of people who are not thinking about economics to fully grasp, because you have to go all the way to the end of the chain of what you're trading to get a full understanding of value for value. Like if you're like, hey, I'm trading, I'm giving my time for some money, you're only looking at half of the equation, because you need to actually look at the other side of, okay, well, what is that money? What is that thing you're doing? It's different when you're trading your time for like eggs. Okay, I'm trading it for food directly. Like if I'm trading, my time for like a cow, the way the barter system used to work, you actually knew you had the hard asset, whatever it was at the end. Like cows are not that hard of an asset, but they're a harder asset than a piece of paper that somebody just printed and told you was worth something. And so it's a really interesting challenge and a really interesting like piece of literal mental gymnastics that you have to do to get to an understanding of, hey, these things that we believed in a fiat world don't actually make sense in a Bitcoin world. Because if you're in a Bitcoin hard money world, you actually have to go all the way back to the beginning of the value chain to understand anything and everything. And so it's really, really interesting, this idea of trading time for something, because in the current world, the problem we have is people are just like, oh, I went to school and I got a master's degree, or I have 74 doctorates or whatever it is, and I traded my time, so I should be making a bunch more money, but the only job I can get is at Starbucks as a part-time barista because I have blue hair and 84 piercings. It's like, yeah, you made a bad call because you didn't understand what you were trading your time for. You traded your time for a piece of paper that's actually worthless, because we don't actually need, underwater basket weaving gender studies people. We just don't. We actually need like rocket scientists and like engineers, except for AI. But anyways,
so but that's interesting. I mean, the underwater basket weaving, that is a joke that has literally been around. Like I remember my dad telling me that joke. This is a joke that has been around like when I was in high school, right? This is a joke that's been around for like 40 or 50 years. When bring you back to another point. When I was in high school, I remember having conversations with peers and other people, adults, being like, yeah, there's no possible way that we're ever going to be able to rely on Social Security. Like, just intellectually, you're like, yeah, there's more boomers than anybody else. So consequently, like, they're just going to, like, it doesn't matter how much you contribute to Social Security because it's just more people. And so the math doesn't math, right? So it's just never going to work out. And so there's like this, that's a concrete example of, oh, well, the standard path of you go to high school, you get a good college, you get a good job, and like that's going to be your future, and then you're going to get a nice, good old retirement, and like that's how it's going to go, and that's going to be good in terms of getting a number of kids and a house and the rest of it. And like, I remember in high school thinking like, I'm not sure that that's going to work out for many people. And I went to high school in the like late 90s, early 2000s. So this has been going on for a long time, and it really causes you to question, like, why is it still going on? Like, why are we still having this same discussion, like 20 years later? And that's on top of another 20 to 30 years before that, where people started to realize, oh, this isn't going to work. Like, this is goofy. Like, my wife's dad at one point told me, he's like, yeah, he studied like personal investing for a while, and then was like totally jaded about it. But he was like, at some point you realize it's all just money chasing after money, or like printed money chasing after printed money. It's all these structures that shouldn't like continue to support themselves. Like, why has this not collapsed? Like, you study it for a little bit and you're like, oh yeah, it's going to collapse like any day now. And then like decades go by and it still hasn't collapsed. And I mean, perhaps this is the power of fiat and the brainwashing that goes on, but like, man, it is so difficult to bridge the gap, to even convince anybody that like, hey, maybe we should do something different. Like,
yeah, I think it might be an order of magnitude change. Where do you remember the hand wringing and how hard it was early in Obama's first term to pass the bailout for the auto industry and that whole big package? Do you remember the size of that bill? It was only $800 billion. Only $800 billion, right? And that was in 2009. And during COVID, the last 2 years of Trump and the 4 years of Biden, we printed $13 trillion in 6 years. I think it's this idea, like your father-in-law saying, how can you have these runaway valuations? How can you have fake money chasing fake money without a crash? And the answer is, if you backfill with printed money, then it doesn't have to crash. But what does happen is massive inflation over an enormous number of things. And for 30 years, the things that have been closest to the money printer, like you were saying, JD, college education, higher education, that's extremely close to the money printer. It's places where the government can create a tremendous amount of debt in a short period of time. So it's Fannie and Freddie in the housing market. It's federal student loan programs and payments to colleges and healthcare. Those are the three major things. And it's not a coincidence that the core inflation numbers started removing all three of those things. So your inflation rate has averaged 2.5% for the last 30 years. If you don't want to go to college, if you don't want to buy the same house that your parents lived in one day, and if you don't need any healthcare, right? But if you want any of those things for your life, then your inflation rate is more like 15%, which is insane. And I think that's the order of magnitude shift that I do see happening among young people. I don't think they've understood that hard money could be the answer to this, should be the answer to this. But I think they are recognizing that. I think that's where this kind of general malaise is coming from.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about that too is, again, going to like Bitcoin wisdom in a fiat world is, one of the things that's a tough pill to swallow, I think, for, myself and of other people who are like new to Bitcoin is like, you will never get rich off of owning Bitcoin. And what I mean by that is the point of Bitcoin is not for you to get rich. Buying Bitcoin and hodling and holding and like just holding on to the asset is not actually a way to make money. It is a way to preserve effort that you have put out in the past. In the beginning, the people who originally were putting the effort into hodling and actually making it worth something, like that was actually what they're being compensated for. Like the people who were doing this, like Adam Back and Satoshi and Hal Finney, and I'm going back to like all the way in the beginning, like those people who were just basically beating the drum of like, hey, you might want to get some in case it catches on. The value they were adding was adding value to the chain by making the chain valuable. A perfect example would be Pokemon cards. Pokemon cards are literally only as valuable as somebody will pay for them. And that's the same thing with money. Money is only as valuable as somebody is willing to give it value. And so the beginning of the Bitcoin journey was people forcibly giving value, starting with Laszlo, who bought pizzas with it, right? Traded Bitcoin for pizzas. Like that was the beginning of the value chain, and it's only become more valuable because of these intrinsic properties it has. It's finite, and it can move over digital channels and things like that. And so going back to what you're saying, there's an Elon Musk quote that I think is actually really, really challenging because it still shows a little bit of the fiat mindset that he has, which is it's okay to have all of your eggs in one basket as long as you control what happens to that basket. That ideology is Wall Street. That ideology is every single government and every single bank in the world, because the basket that they are paying attention to is fiat currency. And so that's part of this battle that we're in right now. Is there is a better way, a finite currency that nobody can steal from the people, but the people who have their eyes on the basket, fiat, don't want that to happen. And because everybody else kind of has their eyes on that basket, because that's what they're trading their time for, if you control the basket, which bankers do, it makes it really, really easy for you to continue to manipulate the basket and manipulate the world to make sure that that basket still has value. And the only way that that'll change is some sly roundabout way, which happens to be Bitcoin. But whether or not Bitcoin can weather Wall Street trying to come in and take over, which is what they're doing right now, is yet to be seen.
I mean, for me, it really begs questions are along the lines of like, how do you convince the fish swimming in water that they're swimming in water? Like, how do you even do that? You don't have to maybe you do have to show them Bitcoin and have them understand Bitcoin, right? But like, that doesn't work. No one cares. So how do you just convince the fish? Like, for me, one thing that's important is like, there's no such thing as a contradiction. It's a famous Ayn Rand quote. There's no such thing as a contradiction. If you encounter a contradiction, reevaluate your premises and you'll find that one is wrong. So how do you show that to somebody? How do you show them, hey, this is an invalid premise? One thing that's coming to mind, I don't know if this works, but it's interesting to me, right? There's the videos online of them just printing the money, right? The actual physical massive stacks of $100 bills, like a million $100 bills. So whatever that is, $100 million. And they're just with the machine, chop up this, chop, 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 spin it around, chop, chop, chop. And it's show that to your children who have the very visceral understanding of what money is. Oh, I can hold it in my hand. This is what I can trade at the store. You show them that's how that money is made. They literally just make it. It's a total fabrication of value. There's no reason why you should work for that money, because somebody else can just print it. Right now, I don't know if that hits on any level, but that's what I want to do. That's what that's the story I want to tell my kids, right?
It actually, so I'll throw one more quote out there from Elon, because I do think Elon has a lot of really interesting things to say. But the other one that actually he said, and I saw this the other day, was and this was actually something he said when people were giving so much flack about being so involved in the last election. But what he said was, if the rules are such that you can't make progress, then you have to fight the rules. And I think that is one of the most important sayings of the last decade in my mind, because that is what the whole Bitcoin ethos is about, is fighting the rules of the system, which is fiat, and trying to show people that there's a better way. The challenge is there's just so much momentum. Momentum is not just the physical inertia behind something. Momentum is actually emotional. And so one of the things that, the whole Bitcoin ethos and mindset is up against is it's against the inertia and momentum within the fiat movement, within the minds and hearts of people in the real world. There has to be a cataclysmic break, like a car accident, like Weimar Germany, or there has to be a cataclysmic event like Japan collapsing, that with their economy collapsing, that would actually make people stop and be like, ow, I don't like that. That was not good. I just lost everything. Like 2008, if 2008 were to happen again, it's going to be on a scale so much larger than it ever was because there's so much more money in the system. But that's why they can't let it happen. And so it's going to be interesting to see how long they can keep these plates spinning. I mean, do you guys think they can? Because that's what I'm curious about. Like, I'm kind of hoping that they can't, but right now that feels like they can just keep kicking the can down the road forever.
Yeah, so I think it's a great point that momentum is emotional, because you have a whole generation of people like this malaise that I was talking about setting in, realizing that they can't afford the life that their parents had, even if they work as hard or harder and they make more money. They could make nominally a lot more money than their parents and still not afford the quality of life that their parents had. That's malaise, right? And that's emotional. And I think there's something to the past 30 years, and this might be related to a religious conversation that I don't know if we want to get into, but as you de-church, there's still a hole of, needing authority in a human heart, right? And a lot of people, right and left, have ascribed that to the federal government, to the highest authority that they see in a human perspective. And I think the existential dread of saying, no, that government is actually manipulating you. They're stealing your time. They're stealing your effort because they can just create the other side of that equation. I think that's an existential emotional issue that's extremely hard to break out of. And to your question about, is there going to be a big dramatic failure? I think they figured out that they don't have to let that happen if they just keep printing money. So I don't see a Weimar, or maybe a Weimar, probably not to that scale. I don't see an 08 happening, which with this massive asset collapse, with the massive real estate value collapse, because there's so much political value around the voting base and the donor base feeling wealthy and continuing to feel wealthy, that they can keep kicking the can down the road as long as they're willing to just print money and they keep hiding inflation. The thing that does happen year over year is what's been happening for the past about 7 years, and I think really ticked up in COVID, which is the people who are unaffected by inflation are the ones with a lot of assets because their assets keep going up. The non-asset class is growing, and the non-asset class is the one that feels all of that inflation, and they get angrier and angrier a little bit more every year, realizing that not being able to describe it or not knowing why, but that anger grows slowly every year. So I don't know what the tipping point is on that. I don't know when Bitcoin hits a high enough price point with a stable enough value that people say, okay, now I trust it. I think we're probably still a couple of years away from that. I think it would probably have to be at $1 million consistently for some time before a true normie would see it as an asset that they could escape to. But I think instead of that 08 style collapse, we've seen for 17 years since then, the only priority is don't have another one of those. All right, that's the fiscal policy. And if it means we're going to raise our inflation rate more and more and more and more as we have to pay off the debts from before, they've shown that that's something they're willing to do. So I think it's more likely it would be a debt spiral that we'd have to pull out of some way instead of an asset collapse.
There's real risk, and let's not understate the real risk of the non-asset holding class suffering from inflation perpetually, because you can look, and I mean, I've done a lot of research on this, but as far as I know, there's no real codified kind of volume that kind of outlines this. But you can think about it logically. When inflation hits and there's an entire class of people that just have to suffer through that inflation, there is a outsized amount of political risk that begins to brew in that economy, right? Which is how you get all of the communist revolutions that we've ever seen, all of the fascist craziness that we've ever seen, like all of it. You can, I mean, this is my assertion. A scholar with much better talent and ability should explore this on their own, but it's fairly clear. The Bolsheviks, there's tons of inflation, and that led to the Bolshevism, which led to the Russian Revolution. Nazism, there's Weimar Germany, there's tons of inflation that leads to Nazism, that leads to Hitler's rise to power and Third Reich. And the same with almost every other system, like same with Pol Pot in Cambodia. It just goes on and on. Same with the French Revolution. Like it just goes on and on and on. And gosh, if only we could connect those dots and see, like, hey, you guys, you're nominally, like, you know, on the right, they're nominally fighting communism. On the left, they're nominally fighting fascism. And none of them can connect the dot that these things, this political impetus to pursue fascism, to pursue communism, which are really just totalitarian collectivism, where me personally and my group of people, that non-asset class holding group, are suffering and have to suffer inflation. We're now, you know, circling the wagons, and we're going to try and fight back. Well, guys, it's like you don't understand that all of these inputs ultimately stem from fiat currency, inflation, the water that you're swimming in.
I have an interesting theory that you just kind of brought to me, but I have told you guys the premise of this before, but I've still been chewing through it. But there are 3 pills in life that you take. If you take one of them, you'll take all 3. There's the red pill, the white pill, and the orange pill. The red pill is, you know, not necessarily conservatism, but it's more of a like approach where you are looking for like libertarianism. Like you're looking for a political like truth. You're looking for an actual like fairness. There's the white pill, which is truth, which if you are on the pursuit of truth, I personally believe you will end up at God. But if you start the libertarian, you know, down the libertarian path, it is very likely you will come to taking the white pill. And then in my mind, there will be the orange pill, which is the pill of, you know, just of hard assets. It's the pill of like economic value for value freedom. It's like the true place of that. I find it interesting, and where I was going with this is it's very interesting to me the amount of people who are either atheistic or Christian. It's like on the binaries, it's on the edges, who come to Bitcoin. Because I think what's interesting about this, and this is where I'm going, is it's very easy to keep people in a box when they're filling the God hole, the truth hole, with a leader. So if your leader is Trump, or if your leader is Kamala Harris, or if your leader is a politician, you have filled the God hole in your life with a supreme being that gives you meaning, which is why you become ardently red or blue. And take any other political person from any other country and put them in that box. And so that is the masses. The masses have filled that hole with some type of ideological leader. They've put an idol, a person, or a movement into that box, which then makes it very easy for them to be stuck in the malaise, to use your word, Corey, because I agree with that, of the culture. Because at the end of the day, the person who is in that hole is already so steeped in the cultural malaise that they're incentivized to keep everybody there because they want to basically be the leader. That's what they want to do. And so they're leading this movement and they have an incentive to keep people there. And so I find it really interesting that, you know, the group of people that are in Bitcoin are either very, very Christian, i.e. they have a rooted rock in that God seat, in that truth seat, in that white pill seat, or they're atheistic, where they have a rooted rock. There can be nothing. It is absolutely, there can be nothing in that seat. And so I think it's interesting. It's like you have to have some kind of true north, right or wrong, before you can even start breaking through and start seeing the orange pill or seeing the red pill, that the seek, you know, the seeking of libertarianism, which is basically not communism, not killing other people. I don't know. It's just interesting. That was just kind of a thought you spurred on for me. It was like, you kind of have to have some kind of true north before you can even be open to the idea that, you know, your world is broken in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think when that story of Jesus with the coin, what do we do with our taxes? And he says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. There's a Christian ethic that I think is true in the other monotheistic religions as well. I think Judaism and Islam have it as well, where you exist as a citizen of a nation, and that's a good thing. It's how it's organized, right? It's how the world was meant to be, right? And I think the Christian ethic says we find a way to work with unity across diversity, which is what the university was initially intended to do. I think they've strayed a bit, but the point being, if you have that true north, that white pill, you have a proper understanding of where do your loyalties lie first. And there's a superseding law of love and goodness and humility and sacrifice that if your nation ever asks you to supersede that, then it is subservient to that law, right? Our self-sacrificial love is a higher call than the call to paying taxes and entering a military draft, or whatever that is. And I think if you have that disordered, I think that's where a lot of the existential dread of our generation is coming from, because I think they thought, I think it's a bit of a relic of the Obama era because of how hated Bush was, how unpopular those wars were. There was this, it was an easy slot in, like, now it's going to be okay. Now we're going into, when Obama was elected, there is this national thought and heart toward, apart from some pretty, extreme on the right Republicans, there's this thought that now we're going to be in this a paradise of liberalism, right? Not necessarily like a Democrat driven thing, but liberalism was now going to reign the day. And that ended as soon as it could possibly end. Like as soon as there was an option for the right's counterpart to that, it happened. And then it bounced back again. And I think that existential dread of like, well, if our person's in charge for long enough and we just have control for long enough, that liberalism utopia is coming. And I think it's just all, personally, I think it's all in place of the kingdom of God and people thinking that there is an authority out there that can deliver them the kingdom of God on earth. And that authority isn't Jesus. And that is destined to fail again and again and again, as often as you make that category mistake.
You have a take, Condor?
I had a good idea, but I've lost it.
I was like, he's processing something, and I scared it out of him. No, but I think you gave me an interesting way of even trying to organize this like red pill, white pill, orange pill thing, because I've used that now for like, since I was orange pilled for like 2 years, and I think there's actually an order to it. It's like the white pill is the God pill, and it's like kind of at the top, and then there's the red pill, and it's kind of that association with man, with other in your community, and then there's the orange pill kind of as the bedrock of like, okay, so you have your community and you have your way of associating with other people, which is the governance structure, right? But then you have the value structure on the bottom, the orange pill. It's like you have this these strata of understanding, because I think you have to have that. You have to have a bedrock of understanding in one or all of these levels before you can change another one, because it's kind of like you're just fighting fires in your life. If you have no mooring in any of these value structures of your life, you're a listless person. You're very listless, and you have no way of actually being. Like, you've seen those people, like you see those guys who are just, chasing, leaves in the wind, because they have, no mooring in any way, shape, or form. They don't have a budget. They don't have a schedule. They don't have any friends. They, they might have a job, but the bigger challenge is, it's like, if you can't make value deductions on one or two levels of your life, you'll never get to making a value decision on that third one. And so it's like having, Christ as a foundation for me, and then having an ideological understanding of like, hey, it's probably not good to steal from people, as my understanding of like libertarianism. Okay, cool. So I've solved this one. Let me look at this one, and let me actually like dive in here. And sadly, I have no qualms with anyone in the world, but I think a very true statement that people don't actually want to face in our current culture is that not everyone is capable of certain things. It's the same thing with even God saying, like, not all people are the people of God. And that's sad, and that's unfortunate, but it's the truth. Like, I'm not going to let every person go drive a semi-truck or fly a 747. People just don't have the skills. And then there's also even bigger things of like, not everybody has a capacity for even like big, deep thought. and that's okay. And I think that's the bigger challenge. I think sometimes as Bitcoiners, like, we want everybody to be a Bitcoiner. It's like, the only way for that to happen is if this orange layer changes. But the only way this orange layer changes is if we solve, the first two. I think.
I don't know if this is pushing back on your point, JD, but in the like Christian world of we have truth, we have really strong moral claims, foundations, traditions that allow us to like have a very clear understanding of moral reality and truth and ethics and like really foundational stuff that allows, in our view, allows us to move forward on things and make decisions about things and come to conclusions about reality. Hey, there's this new thing. Well, yeah, that's fine. We have this like extremely long history and context and way of processing new thing. So Christians can be like, oh yeah, let's look at this new thing, evaluate it according to, the long history that we have of evaluating things similar to this or a little bit different or same category, right? And they're like, great, we can evaluate this. Now, when you put Bitcoin in hey, here's the new thing, Christian, evaluate it. They're just like lost out of their mind. One thing, you guys probably have thoughts about that, but one thing that comes to mind is that, and perhaps this is why people evaluate Bitcoin in terms of like the parable of the sower, or Christians evaluate Bitcoin in terms of the parable of the sower. Hey, you got to sow it. If you sow it here, it's going to grow too fast. If you sow it on the right spot, it's going to grow just right. If you sow it over here, it's not going to grow at all, right? So Bitcoins look at this and they're like, I need to do more research. I need to think about this more. I need to, make sure that I'm taking deliberate and wise actions. And, I'm not going to go all in, of course. I'm going to do some more research, maybe like buy a little bit, $100, see how it works. Like there's this real, like, that's kind of the framework in my exposure to this. That's kind of the framework, right? But what if that's just the wrong paradigm to evaluate Bitcoin under, right? Like what if the paradigm is actually what Jesus says about measurement, which is with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you and more. Well, then you're like, no, that's not a, well, I'm going to be careful and deliberate about this. That's no, I need to use a better ruler like now, because if I don't, all of my life is going to be disordered. And there's a real consequence to that.
I think it goes to another parable of the man discovering the treasure in the field, and he sells everything he has to buy the field, right? Mm-hmm. That's his description of the kingdom of God. Once you find that, you don't step into it and do some research and take a little bit of it to see if it's good, try it on for yourself, see if you like it, then get a little bit more. He's saying, I'm completely flipping the power dynamic of this world, and the best thing that you can do is get all in as soon as you can. Just do that. Just pursue that. All right. And that supersedes Bitcoin, obviously. But I think Bitcoin is a similar thing, right? It's if it's superior, if it is actually what it says it is, then do everything you can to be as much a part of it as you can, because everything else is dying. And that's what he's getting at with the kingdom of God too. Like everything outside of this is futile. There's nothing else you're doing with your time and with your life that is of any value. And I think that it's a similar paradigm for fiat versus Bitcoin.
I love that, and it goes to like one of the quotes from Henry Ford that kind of spoke to me about like this notion of like making claims. It's like you're making claim on that field. You found that treasure, and you're making a claim to it. You're going all in it. And one of the things that is in the Ford biography, and he said, is you can't build a reputation on what you were going to do. Like you have to have done it. You have to have made a decision. You have to have been decisive in your declarations. And I think it's really, really valuable, the notion of finding your treasure and claiming it. And I think that's one thing that, I really am appreciative of the Bitcoin community is, they've found the treasure and they're claiming it. They're like, no, this is what is actually valuable and we're going to go do it. And And it's not just the asset of Bitcoin. It's conversations like this where we're actually like having larger existential conversations about value and worth and health and life and time and what all those things mean, because humans have kind of lost their ideology around those things. They've lost their claim on those things. They've just kind of like been there. They've been out of sight, out of mind. You know, you've been told you have your weekends, right? You work 5 days a week and then you're off Saturday, Sunday. Well, why? Why is that? Why is the case of that? You know, why do we have a 24-hour clock? Why do we have 12 months in a year and not 13 that are 28 days, right? It's like we have been born into this structure that we've never questioned. And I think it's really cool to see a cultural awakening with, you know, Bitcoin that is building a reputation of being a countercultural thing in every way, shape, and form, because they've found a valuable thing and they're staking their claim. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. I think the months are because of the moons. That one makes a little bit more sense. It reflects the natural order. But I love it. I hear what you're saying. And I think the natural human heart wants to think across a long-term time frame. They want to think about their whole life. They want to think about their impact. And as you devalue money, which is one of our primary interactions of value in the world, if you just start taking that away, slowly over time, people won't think that way because they can't. And they'll think about necessity instead of thinking about beauty. And that's a tragedy. That is a massive, massive tragedy. And we see it in art. We see it reflected everywhere. So I think Bitcoin, if you align with Bitcoin, you're aligning more with what your human heart wants to do anyway, which is think about the long term and think about the greater things, the higher order things.
You've been quite a bit in, I will say, more beautiful places than the United States of late. And I'm actually curious your take on, like, is there any, I'm going to say, colloquial wisdom that you kind of heard repeated in any of these places, or not, or lack thereof? Like, I'm very curious, you know, in Europe, are they thinking this way of like, we need to get back to our roots, we need to get back to faith in something, you know, we need to get back to beauty? Or is it still, you know, just kind of like laissez-faire, you know, and, you know, nothing matters and woe is me, and, you know, the man is always oppressing me and there's nothing we can do? Like, I'm very curious.
Well, I spent the most time embedded in Italy, and I think the biggest difference there is a focus on the present moment. That I think that was probably the biggest cultural difference with America. They don't have nearly the weight on work that we do, often in a really healthy way, sometimes not a healthy way. And it's very easy to romanticize la dolce vita. And when you're at a cafe having a cappuccino in the morning before 11 a.m., of course, or, you know, you're just at the beach at, you know, the Ionian Sea, and it is living in the moment there is fantastic. Turn your emails off. That is an amazing thing. And it's something they really have. On the other hand, they have a tremendous amount of fiat corruption as well. And their government, from a business perspective and economic perspective, is far more oppressive than ours. Their small businesses are taxed on revenue, not profit, which means you have to be profitable enough in your first year to cover the taxes on your revenue. That's insane. It's almost impossible to start a business there. It's very, very hard to jump economic classes there. And so I think there's this symbiotic relationship to what they value culturally, which is beauty, and which is the present moment and appreciating the beauty of the moment, right? That it's a very common refrain. It's a really beautiful thing. But there's this symbiotic thing of there's no future for us anyway, so we kind of have to do this. And I think that, you know, before we over romanticize other cultures that have these aspects of American culture that we don't have, you do have to look at the other side. Because I talk to a lot of people there, and their highest goal is to move to America and start a business. That's what they want to do. And the people who are completely overworked and stressed and on this fiat rat race in America just want to go sit on a beach in Italy. And just know that the people who are sitting on the beach in Italy don't necessarily want to only do that. They want the opportunity to do what we do. So somewhere in between those, I think, is a more ideal way for a human to live their life.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a Italian cousin come and stay with us for a couple months, and it was a similar thing that they said is the business owner is vilified, and the you know, the social protections are revered. And it's this really interesting twisted understanding where they're just like, do you realize where those social protections are coming from? Like, do you realize where that value is upstream being generated? It's coming from that business owner. And so it's really twisted is the only way I can think about. It's just like a twisted understanding of like how value actually works. And this comes back to the whole, Bitcoin understanding in a fiat world is, I think the most valuable thing Bitcoin has taught me is value starts somewhere. It has to start somewhere. And if where the value is coming from, i.e. if the measure, as Bondo were saying, is bastardized, then you don't actually have real value. All you have is a bastardized system that is oppressing people. And until you can completely, rip out all the weeds, change out that system, you will never have a fair system, period. It just cannot exist. It cannot symbiotically be fair and be oppressive at the same time. Those two things cannot coexist.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
well,
do you have any last thoughts and kind of wrap up? We appreciate everybody kind of jumping in, but I'm just,
no, I think we covered it. That was good. That was a fun conversation.
Yeah, no, it was sweet to have you guys on. Thank you everybody for just kind of jumping in and hanging out with us. We're, still figuring this thing out. And if you have any feedback, please feel free to like drop it in if you want us to do like current events or any of those things, or just hear us continue to ramble on hot takes on some of these more like philosophical topics. But it's been it's been fun doing these. We're on our road to 100. Gonna get there as fast as we can, but it's definitely been a cool thing to kind of like learn and figure out some of these tools and start trying to formulate thoughts verbally versus just doing it all in our heads.
Absolutely.
So,
cool.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to Better by Bitcoin. Bitcoin makes everything better. Like, subscribe, and follow us on X at BetterBYBTC, YouTube at BetterBYBitcoin. Not financial advice, mathematical certainty.